When my daughter-in-law told me to leave, I smiled instead of crying. At least, I think I smiled. Inside, my chest felt heavy, like someone had pressed down on it with hands I could not see. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. I just nodded and walked to my room, pretending everything was fine. I never thought it would come to this. I had spent years caring for my family, giving my love freely, trying to be there for everyone. And yet, that day, I realized that sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes it isn't enough to hold people together. I remember standing by the window, watching the rain slide down the glass, listening to the soft tapping against the roof. The house was quiet, too quiet. The smell of dinner still lingered in the kitchen. It was one of those evenings where everything should feel warm and safe, but instead it felt hollow. I asked myself over and over, how did we get here? When did she start seeing me as a stranger? When did her words start to hurt more than any harsh action could? And, most painfully, why did my own son not defend me, not even a little? I tried to breathe. I told myself to be calm, to think clearly, but the tears came anyway, slowly at first, then faster, until my pillow was damp and my heart ached in ways I had never known. I thought about all the birthdays I baked for, all the nights I stayed awake worrying about my son, all the times I held his hand when he felt scared or lonely. All of it invisible now, and yet, somewhere in that sadness, I felt a strange clarity. A small voice inside me whispered, "You are still here. You are still yourself. You can still find your way through this." I didn't understand it then, but I would learn slowly that life doesn't always follow the path we expect. Sometimes the hardest moments teach us the quietest lessons. I want to tell you about my family, not because I want sympathy, but because the story matters. My son, Amir, is my heart. From the moment he was born, I knew I would do anything to protect him. He was small and bright and full of laughter, and I loved him in a way that only a mother can. When Amir met Layla, I was happy at first. She was polite, kind, and seemed to fit into our family. She smiled when she saw me, laughed at my silly jokes, and told stories about her childhood that reminded me of my own youth. I thought maybe this is someone who will love my son and honor our family. I tried to be a good mother, in law, as best as I could. I gave her space, but I also tried to include her in family traditions. I made her tea when she was tired. I asked her how she was feeling when she looked upset. I even let her decide some of the holiday plans, even though it made me a little nervous. In the beginning, things seemed fine. We laughed together. We celebrated birthdays and anniversaries. I remember the first time Layla baked for the family. She made these tiny little chocolate tarts, and Amir was so proud of her. I smiled, feeling happy that my son had found someone who made him laugh like he did when he was a boy. But slowly things began to change, little moments at first, a sigh here, a sharp word there. I brushed it off, telling myself I was imagining it. Maybe she was stressed, I thought. Maybe it was just one of those days. I didn't notice how often she would roll her eyes when I spoke, or how she whispered with Amir in corners where I couldn't hear. I didn't notice that I was slowly being excluded from conversations about the family, the house, the future. I just thought perhaps I am overthinking. Perhaps every mother-in-law feels this sometimes. Looking back now, I realize the first cracks appeared in small ways, a smile that didn't reach her eyes, a polite word that carried sharpness. I ignored them because I loved my son and I wanted him to be happy. I thought love could fix anything. But sometimes love can't fix the unseen resentments that build quietly, like shadows in the corners of a room. And sometimes the people we trust most are the ones who hurt us in ways we never expected. It started with small things. At first, I didn't notice them. Little moments that seemed harmless but, looking back, were the first signs of a growing distance between us. She began choosing where she wanted to sit at the table, avoiding me subtly but consistently. At family dinners, she would whisper to Amir while I poured water or passed the bread, her eyes darting toward me but never meeting mine. I told myself it didn't matter, that maybe she was just shy. But inside, a quiet ache was forming, like water slowly filling a cup that I couldn't stop. One evening, Amir and I were in the kitchen, and Layla came in with her phone in her hand. She glanced at me briefly and then said, "Mom, could you not talk so loudly? I'm trying to focus." I froze. My words caught in my throat. I wasn't very loud. I said softly, unsure if I sounded defensive or sad. Amir didn't look up. He was busy washing dishes, and I could see the hesitation in his hands. I wanted him to say something, anything. But he only murmured, "It's okay, Mom, don't mind her." I nodded, forcing a smile, of course. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't stop replaying the moment. Her words weren't just loud or small, they were deliberate, I could feel it, and yet Amir seemed blind to it. A few weeks later, she started changing the way she spoke to me in front of others. At the grocery store, at family gatherings, even at the doctor's office, she would make remarks that were polite on the surface but carried a sting beneath. One time, she said, "You really don't understand these modern things, do you?" And when I hesitated, unsure how to answer, she smiled tightly and walked away. Amir laughed nervously. I could see he didn't want to argue, but he didn't stop her either. The moments accumulated. Like raindrops, they seemed harmless alone, but together they soaked me in a cold, unrelenting sadness. I tried talking to Amir about it, carefully, gently, hoping he would see what I was feeling. "Amir," I said one evening while we were watching television, I don't know, pushed out. Sometimes it seems like Layla doesn't want me around." He sighed. He turned to me with a tired smile. "Mom, she's just stressed. You know, work, the house, everything. Don't take it personally." I nodded, but my heart sank. "Don't take it personally." I tried repeating it like a mantra in my head, but every time I saw her glare or catch me off guard with a remark, the words felt hollow. Then came the small exclusions, invitations that never came, plans I didn't know about until the day of, conversations that stopped when I entered a room. One Saturday, I wanted to bake some cookies for Amir, just like I used to do when he was little. I bought the ingredients, measured everything carefully, and began mixing the dough. When I walked into the living room to show Amir, Layla looked at me with a tight smile. "Mom, we already have dessert," she said softly, but the edge in her voice cut deeper than any sharp word could. I froze, my hands trembling slightly. "Oh, I just thought." Amir looked away, busy scrolling on his phone. I swallowed hard. "It's okay," I whispered, retreating to the kitchen, putting the cookies back in the tin. The smell of chocolate and butter filled the air, but it didn't bring comfort. It reminded me that I was slowly losing my place in the home I had built with love. I tried to be patient. I tried to tell myself that this was temporary, that maybe she was stressed or insecure, or maybe she simply didn't understand my intentions. I kept giving, kept trying to connect, kept loving, but with every cold glance, every whispered word behind my back, the weight grew heavier. The turning point began with a simple misunderstanding. One evening, Amir and I were folding laundry together. She walked in, looked at the neatly stacked clothes, and said, "You folded these wrong. I'll do it myself next time." I looked at her, my hand still on the shirts. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize. No, really, it's fine," she said, brushing past me with a quick, curt movement. She didn't even glance at Amir. He said nothing. I said nothing. But later that night, I could feel the tension lingering in the corners of the house like a shadow that wouldn't leave. Soon after, the real betrayal began. I discovered it by accident, an email left open on Amir's laptop. Layla had been speaking to our neighbors, exaggerating small incidents, twisting moments where I had tried to help into stories that made me seem overbearing. She painted herself as the victim, and I was the antagonist in her narrative. I stared at the screen, frozen. My heart felt like it had cracked in two. I didn't want to believe it. Surely, I told myself, surely she wouldn't do this. Not to me, not after everything, but the evidence was there, clear words, clear intentions, written down where I could read them. My mind spun. I wanted to scream, to cry, to run away. Instead, I sat there quietly, letting the room spin around me, letting the tears fall silently. When Amir came in, I didn't know how to tell him. I saw something. I whispered finally, my voice barely audible. "What is it?" he asked, concerned. "It's about Layla." My words trembled. She's been saying things about me to people about our family. He frowned, running a hand through his hair. "Mom, maybe you misunderstood." I shook my head. "No, Amir, I didn't. I saw it myself." He looked away, frustrated. "Mom, I don't want to hear this. You're imagining things." I wanted to argue, to insist, to make him see the truth. But I didn't. I let him walk away, and I let the quiet settle over the house. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, feeling the full weight of isolation. From that moment, everything changed. I noticed the calculated distance, the way she would plan activities without me, the way she would always insert herself between me and Amir. I tried to hold on, tried to speak, tried to find a way back, but each attempt seemed to push me further away. I remember one particular day, sitting in the living room, the sunlight streaming in softly through the curtains. I watched Amir and Layla laughing together, a private joke that left me on the outside. I felt a hollow pang of grief that I didn't know how to express. I wanted to join them, to be part of the moment, but I felt invisible. And that's when I realized I was losing my family, slowly, quietly, piece by piece. And it hurt more than I had ever imagined. It happened on a quiet Sunday afternoon. The kind of Sunday where sunlight filters softly through the curtains, the air smells faintly of baked bread, and the world feels still. I had prepared my special chicken stew, the one Amir always loved as a child. I was humming quietly to myself in the kitchen when I heard their laughter coming from the living room. I carried the tray carefully and peeked around the corner. They were sitting together on the sofa, leaning close, whispering. Amir laughed at something Layla said, and she smiled, that tight, perfect smile that had once made me trust her. Now it sent a shiver down my spine. I walked in slowly. "Amir, dinner's ready," I said softly, trying to mask the tremor in my voice. They both turned toward me. Amir gave a quick smile, distracted. Layla's eyes flicked at me, and for a moment I saw something I hadn't seen before, a subtle, calculated shift in her expression. It wasn't kindness, it wasn't warmth, it was a look that said, "You don't belong here." I set the tray down and waited. Amir started to rise, but she put a gentle hand on his arm, stopping him. "It's okay, I'll help," she said in a voice that sounded sweet, but carried a weight I couldn't ignore. I nodded and forced a small smile. "Thank you, dear." I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling growing inside me, but my heart told me this was different. Something had changed. Something had crossed a line. Later that evening, I decided I couldn't stay silent any longer. I went into the living room where they were arranging the books on the shelf. I took a deep breath. "Layla, can we talk?" I asked, my voice calm but steady. She turned, her smile polite but distant. "Of course, Mom. What is it?" I hesitated, then said, "I've noticed things have been different. You've been cold toward me, and I don't understand why. I've tried to be patient, to give space to love, but I feel like I'm being pushed out of my own family." There was a pause. The air seemed to thicken, heavy and silent. She looked at me, then glanced at Amir. I could see the tension in his shoulders. She finally spoke. "Mom, maybe you don't understand your place here." My chest tightened. My place has always been with my son, with my family. I've never tried to hurt anyone, Layla. I just wanted to be part of your lives." Her lips pressed together. "Sometimes you make things harder. Amir needs peace, not complications. You're overstepping." I swallowed hard. "Overstepping?" I tried to breathe slowly. I didn't know you felt that way. I only wanted to help, to love. I never wanted to make things difficult." She shook her head. "It's too late for that. Things have changed, and maybe it's best if you take a step back, just for a while." I felt the room spin. Step back? Take a step back from my own home, my own family. The words didn't make sense. Step back, I whispered. "Do you mean leave?" "Yes," she said quietly but firmly. "Maybe it's better this way." I stared at her. For a moment the world seemed to freeze. I wanted to shout, to plead, to collapse in tears, but I didn't. I only nodded, my hands trembling at my sides. I understand." I said softly, though I didn't understand at all. After that day, everything changed. I spent my mornings quietly in my room, trying to keep the house running, cooking meals I was no longer allowed to serve, folding clothes that I wasn't meant to touch. I watched from the sidelines as Amir and Layla continued their life together, a life that seemed to exist without me. The betrayal stung most when I realized that Amir, my son, the boy I had raised, the man I had nurtured, was no longer my protector. He no longer looked at me the way he used to. He no longer saw the hurt in my eyes. He had chosen her comfort over our bond, and the realization cut deeper than any harsh word Layla could ever say. One night I sat by the window, watching the rain fall, just like that first day. I held a mug of tea, my hands shaking slightly. I thought about everything I had done for this family, the sleepless nights, the celebrations, the sacrifices. I thought about the way Amir would run into my arms when he was hurt, how he would laugh at my silly jokes, how he trusted me with every secret and every fear. And now it felt like all of that had been erased. I remembered the first time I had held him as a baby, feeling his tiny fingers wrap around mine. I remembered teaching him to ride a bike, comforting him after his first heartbreak, staying awake through feverish nights. And now she had built a wall between us, a wall I didn't know how to tear down, but the breaking point came not just from exclusion, it came from the realization of intent. I found the journal one afternoon, tucked away behind some books on the shelf. I hadn't meant to look through it. I was dusting, cleaning, trying to keep busy so the loneliness wouldn't overwhelm me, but there it was. Inside, Layla had written everything, every complaint, every criticism, every plan to subtly remove me from our lives. She described me as intrusive, old-fashioned, overbearing. She celebrated little victories when I didn't know something about the house, when Amir didn't listen to me, when I felt invisible. I sat on the floor, the journal in my lap, feeling a combination of heartbreak and disbelief. I could not believe this was happening. I could not believe she had worked so carefully, so deliberately, to erase me from the life I had loved for decades. I didn't confront her immediately. I couldn't. I didn't have the strength. Instead, I went to Amir. I showed him the journal, my hands shaking. Look, Amir, this is happening. She's been planning this about me, about us. He glanced at it, then sighed. Mom, maybe it's just her thoughts. It doesn't mean anything. I felt a tear escape. Amir, look at what she wrote. She calls me names. She wants me gone. Can't you see? He shook his head. Mom, please just let it go. Don't make this worse. At that moment, I realized something profound. I could not rely on Amir to defend me. I could not rely on anyone else to validate my feelings. The truth of the betrayal was mine alone to bear. That night, I cried silently, letting the tears fall freely. I thought about leaving, about giving up, about retreating from a world that no longer seemed to have a place for me. But somewhere in that sadness, a small voice whispered, "You are still here. You are still you." It was the first time I truly understood the weight of betrayal. Not just the words, not just the actions, but the quiet, deliberate dismantling of a bond that had once been sacred. And in that understanding, I felt the stirrings of something else, not anger, not revenge, but a quiet determination. I would endure, I would survive, I would find a way to hold on to myself, even if the family I loved so dearly no longer had room for me. After that day, the house felt different, not loud, not quiet, just heavy. Every corner seemed to carry the weight of unspoken words. I moved slowly through the rooms, careful not to disturb them, careful not to attract attention. I felt like a shadow in the very home I had built with love. At first, I wanted to leave. I considered packing a bag and driving away, letting the sadness swallow me somewhere far from the eyes that no longer saw me. But something inside stopped me. Maybe it was the years of memories that clung to every corner, the laughter, the tears, the milestones I had witnessed. Maybe it was the part of me that refused to disappear quietly. I decided to stay, but differently. I stayed quietly, observing, learning to live with the absence of recognition. I focused on small things, keeping the kitchen tidy, watering the plants, folding clothes just because it gave me a sense of purpose. I didn't interact much anymore. I didn't try to argue or to prove myself. I simply existed, and in that quiet, something unexpected happened. I began to see clearly, without the interference of hope or expectation. I saw that Layla's words, her actions, her manipulations, they spoke more about her than about me. They reflected her fears, her insecurities, her need to control, and Amir, he wasn't unkind. He simply didn't know how to see past the illusions she had created. I realized that my grief was not just about being excluded, it was about losing the sense of home I had carried inside me, about losing the feeling of belonging. And in that realization, I found a strange kind of clarity. I could not control their actions, I could not make them see the truth. But I could control myself, my feelings, my choices. Days passed, then weeks. I began to reconnect with myself, to nurture the quiet part of me that had been drowned by the chaos of betrayal. I took long walks, feeling the rain on my face and the sun on my shoulders. I read books I had ignored for years. I wrote letters I never sent, pouring my heart onto paper, and slowly the pain began to soften, not vanish, but soften enough for me to breathe. One evening, Amir came to my room. He looked tired, restless, and uncertain. "Mom," he said quietly, "can we talk?" I nodded, not knowing what to expect. I feel like I've been blind," he admitted. "I didn't see how much this has hurt you. I didn't realize, I didn't notice what was happening." I looked at him, my heart aching. "Amir, I never wanted to hurt anyone. I only wanted to love, and I only wanted it to be part of your life." He took a deep breath. "I know, Mom, I know, and I'm sorry. I should have protected you, should have listened. I failed you." Tears welled in my eyes, not from anger, but from the release of a long-held ache. "It's okay, Amir," I whispered. "I don't need apologies. I just needed to be seen, and maybe now we can try, slowly, to understand each other again." He nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. It wasn't perfect. The wounds were still there. The trust needed to be rebuilt, piece by piece. But for the first time in months, I felt the faint glimmer of connection, a reminder that love doesn't disappear entirely, even when tested. I also learned something about Layla, not to excuse her behavior, but to protect my own heart. I could care for her, be polite, be civil, but I didn't have to expect warmth or gratitude. I didn't have to let her words define my worth. I had discovered that my value wasn't measured by someone else's approval, even if that someone was family. In the weeks that followed, I started small gestures of reconnection. I cooked a meal and left it on the table without comment, just letting it be. I smiled at Layla when she walked past without expectation, without bitterness. I began talking to Amir more openly, sharing stories from my childhood, my memories, my thoughts. Slowly, the distance began to shrink, not because the past was erased, but because I had chosen to show up with patience and presence rather than resentment. There were moments of doubt, of sadness, of quiet longing for the way things had been. Some nights I would sit by the window, watching the rain, and wonder if we could ever fully return to what we once had. But then I realized that life isn't about returning. It's about moving forward with awareness, with understanding, and with love that doesn't demand anything in return. One day, Layla spoke to me differently. She didn't apologize. She didn't try to explain. She simply said, "Mom, I didn't realize," and then she left it unsaid. I didn't press her. I didn't need her words to feel better. I had already found my strength. I began to find joy in small things again. In cooking, in laughter with Amir when he remembered a childhood story, in quiet moments of reflection. I realized that betrayal doesn't have to destroy us. It doesn't have to define us. We can survive it. We can grow from it. I also learned the quiet power of boundaries. I learned that it's okay to step back when someone's actions hurt us, even if that someone is family. Protecting ourselves is not betrayal. Loving ourselves is not selfish. It is necessary for healing, for survival, for the continuation of life in its truest form. In the months that followed, our home slowly felt lighter, not perfect, not fully healed, but lighter. There were smiles, conversations, and moments of genuine connection. Amir began including me more, acknowledging my presence without prompting. Layla remained cautious, but the tension was no longer unbearable. And in all of this, I discovered a quiet truth. Forgiveness is not about letting someone off the hook. Forgiveness is about freeing ourselves from the weight of resentment. It is about reclaiming our peace. And when we find that peace, we can continue to love without fear, without pain, without expectation. I still remember that first day of betrayal, the words that cut deep, the silence that followed. But I also remember the day I realized I could survive it, the day I chose to live with grace, the day I found strength in my own heart. Life doesn't always go as we hope. People don't always love as we expect, and sometimes those we hold closest hurt us in ways we never imagined. But even in the quiet heartbreak, there is growth. Even in the deepest sadness, there is understanding. And even when a family seems fractured, love can still find its way, slowly, quietly, and in its own imperfect way. As the days turned into weeks and the weeks into months, I began to see life differently. The house still had its quiet moments, the soft hum of the refrigerator, the distant laughter of Amir and Layla, and the gentle tapping of rain against the windows. But instead of feeling hollow, these sounds began to feel familiar again, like a rhythm I could move with, not against. I realized that life doesn't always give us what we want, and people don't always act as we hope. Sometimes love isn't returned in the way we imagine. Sometimes the ones closest to us make choices that hurt deeply, but even in those moments we have a choice to let the hurt define us or to let it teach us something about ourselves. I learned that my worth is not measured by someone else's approval. I learned that love does not need recognition to exist. And I learned that even when betrayal cuts deep, there is still a space for healing, for understanding, and for quiet, steady growth. I began to focus on the moments that still mattered: the laughter of my son when he remembers a childhood story, the warmth of cooking a meal just because I enjoy it, the simple joy of sitting by the window and watching the rain fall. These small moments became my sanctuary. They reminded me that life is not just about being accepted by others, but about accepting ourselves, even when the world seems to turn against us. Amir and I began to rebuild our connection, slowly, carefully, without forcing the past to be undone. He listened more, spoke more openly, and sometimes just sat with me in silence, a quiet acknowledgement that we still belonged to each other in ways that words couldn't capture. And lately, well, our relationship never became perfect, but I learned to protect my heart while offering kindness. I could choose to be polite, to care, to respect boundaries without expecting her to meet me halfway. It was freeing in a way I hadn't anticipated. Looking back, I understand that betrayal, pain, and exclusion are not the end of a story. They are part of it. They are the moments that teach us patience, empathy, and the quiet power of resilience. They are the experiences that show us how to love without dependence, how to find strength in solitude, and how to hold on to hope even when it feels distant. I don't speak of resentment anymore. I speak of understanding. I don't wait for apologies that may never come. I wait for moments of genuine connection, however small, however brief. And in doing so, I have discovered a calm I didn't know was possible, a peace that comes not from changing others, but from embracing the love and strength that already exist within ourselves. So if you ever find yourself feeling invisible, betrayed, or pushed out by the ones you love most, I want you to remember this: your heart is still yours. Your love is still valid, and even in the quietest, loneliest moments, you can find a way forward. You can heal. You can grow, and one day you may even look back and see that the most difficult pain taught you the greatest lessons. Life will not always be easy, and people will not always meet your expectations, but your heart, your beautiful, resilient heart, will carry you through. And in the end, that is more than enough.